Point field goals, banning of the tush push. That is right, folks. Football is only 30 days away. UFL has finally released their 2026 playing rules. We've got some great rules and some not so great rules. Let's break it all down with our UFL 2026 rules breakdown. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of the D-Gen Docs here on the DFSG Plus channel. What is up, folks? We are back. I told you we'd be back. We finally have some 2026 playing rules. We finally understand how this crazy league is going to play this season. Released today, hot off the presses. We've got a dandy of a number of new rules here. Again, I think some are going to be great and some are a little gimmicky, but hey, I'm going to break down all of these rules for you and I'll let you decide. So that is the main focus of the show. It's going to be a shorter episode, all focused on the rules because we got those released today. UFL put out some videos and it's officially on their website. We are just 31 days away from kickoff, March 27th here. Finally able to see how this is going to be playing. You know, this is one where I was not going to be putting any bets or seeing anything until we figure out how this is actually going to look, because UFL is kind of known for being this experimental, almost developmental league for the NFL. We've seen the kickoff change because of what spring football has done. They've gotten some new oddities, and this year is no stranger. New owner Mike Rapoli there is not afraid of kind of doing whatever he wants there. As far as I know, the big one is going to be the banning of the tush push, which the NFL has already said they are not going to touch. So let's just jump right into it here. We're going to start with the heavy hitters, the big ones. The first one, and that's got a lot of attention here, is the new 4-point field goal here. So it's fairly simple of a rule. It's essentially any kick farther than 60 yards is going to be 4 points instead of 3. Now, I know what you may be thinking. If you have not really watched a lot of spring football, you may think, all right, look, if these guys aren't good enough for the NFL, how do you expect these kickers to be kicking these 60-plus yarders? Like, is this rule even going to be relevant? Well, have you heard of a guy named Brandon Aubrey? Arguably the best kicker in the NFL right now for the Dallas Cowboys. He came from spring football, the USFL, back in the 2024 season. Now he is one of the best kickers in the league. Okay, maybe that's just a one-off. Well, have we heard of Mr. Jake Bates down there in Detroit? Jake Bates, he was part of the UFL the year before last, and he is now on the Detroit Lions. Kicked for the Michigan Panthers and just went over after that season right over to Detroit, kicked in the same stadium there in Ford Field, and now he is a staple and one of the better kickers in the league. So this is actually going to be a pretty interesting rule. 60 plus, this one's pretty simple as far as not having to break it down too much. Now, looking at the kickers for the UFL right now, not a lot of, if any, big names. Matt McCrane might be the biggest quote-unquote name just because he kicked in the league last year. A lot of new guys. But again, no one knew Brandon Aubrey. Brandon Aubrey, a guy who played soccer most of his life, barely played football at all. No one knew Jake Bates. So this is really an opportunity for kickers to truly matter. Like, this is going to be, think about it, right? How many situations do we see where a team is down by 3? They're looking for a field goal to tie. Well, now you're taking a situation where late in the game, instead of trying to drive for a game-tying field goal, you could be driving for a game-winning field goal if you take that risk with the 60-plus yarder there. Also, maybe this makes coaches more aggressive to try those 60-yard kicks, and then if they miss, then obviously the other team gets better field position. So I think a running theme of these new rules of the UFL is they want offense, right? They want points. They want it to be exciting. And I think the NFL can fall into that as well, as trying to be so pro offensive league, because points get butts and seats and sell tickets and, yada, yada, yada. So I think that's going to be a common theme, is that a lot of this is to make it more appealing, make it more entertaining for the fans there. But yeah, starting with that 4-point field goal. And then probably the most controversial one, the one that's getting the most buzz, Adam Schefter tweeted it out. Because the NFL last season going into their off season, the hot topic was, hey, are we going to ban the tush push, right? Obviously, the Philadelphia Eagles kind of created it and perfected it, and it was a real key piece for their kind of 3-year run where they went to a couple Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl there. And there was 20 or something teams that came out in the NFL and said that the play is unsafe, quote unquote, and tried to ban it. It's funny because teams like the Buffalo Bills were one of those teams, and then there was an integral part for them this season. They call it the snowplow or Buffalo snowplow or whatever it is with Josh Allen running it. It was used to win their playoff game against Jacksonville this year. So it's interesting how everyone was trying to ban it, and then they just kind of developed and used it. And now no one is calling to ban it in the NFL. It's already been said that the NFL will not ban it. However, the UFL announced today the UFL will ban the tush push, the elimination of the tush push, as you see here. Quarterback takes a snap, immediately drives forward as the offensive line surges, assisted by additional players, yada, yada, yada. Now, part of the issue here was for the NFL was how are they going to officiate this? Is this going to be like you can't push a guy forward at all? In a traditional QB sneak, sometimes you see the running back help push the quarterback forward. So I'm curious to see if it's really just you can't line up in that true, as we see here in the Super Bowl, that I believe the Eagles did win this one. Actually, no, this might have been the one before where they lost to the Chiefs, but where they were running it in the Super Bowl here. I'm curious to see how this is going to be truly officiated on the field. We will not see this any more of this formation where, we may see a normal traditional QB sneak, but no more of that kind of tush push. However, kind of my thoughts on this is, look, I am a New York Giants fan. I do not like the Philadelphia Eagles at all. So, even I will say this is the Eagles kind of play that they created and things like this. I kind of don't love the outright banning of the tush push here for the UFL for a couple of reasons. One, I think the play itself is fine. I don't think you should ban something just because one team is better at it than others when everyone has the ability to run it. I think, honestly, what became the issue with the tush push is the officials. It was just a play that seemed like they could just not officiate it appropriately. With the UFL, with every play being reviewable, with the multiple camera angles that they like to show off, I was kind of hoping they would take this as an opportunity to show, you can officiate this play properly, right? Just call offsides, both offensive, defense, and call false starts. And I think everyone would be happy. But now they're just kind of saying, nope, we're not going to ban it. Dean Blandino, who's the head of officiating for the UFL, he said during the NFL, he's done with this play or whatever. He doesn't like it. So I'm sure that had a lot of influence. I think it's a little bit of a misstep. But in all reality, there have been 0 tush pushes ran in all of spring football since the rebirth of the new XFL, USFL, UFL. There's been none. And a big reason is because training camp is only a month. These guys are just getting to know each other's names and get this chemistry down. The Eagles were so good at the tush push because they could take their great offensive line coach and Jeff Stoutland and, Jason Kelsey and that great offensive line, and they worked at that play tirelessly. So I don't really understand how, I don't think this is really going to impact the UFL at all because I don't see this being ran. It's a situation where they're not going to have the time to create that chemistry, and no one did it in the years before. So this is a little bit one where it's a little bit more of the headline and less of, I think, the true impact on the game. Ultimately, QB sneaks should still be allowed, should not have a huge impact there, but it is kind of the hot topic of, yes, the UFL is banning the tush push. All right, moving along there. I think this is a fun one. This is going to the college game where they're saying a catch only needs 1 foot inbounds to constitute a catch. Obviously, this rule we are all familiar with college football. In the NFL, professional, it's usually 2 feet inbounds for a catch. They are going to the 1 foot to the NCAA college football rules. I think this, again, is more of a pro offense, pro points, pro entertainment type of move here. I don't really hate it either way. I think this is going to give advantage to the offense, and I think we are going to see some crazy catches. I think there's an example here between the Oklahoma Red River shootout there, Oklahoma, Texas. You have Dante Moore making a play on the sidelines, making an absolutely absurd catch. I think we get the opportunity to see some of those fun plays. I'm sure if you're a DB in the NFL, this is not what you want to see because the sideline is your friend and you want to be able to push wide receivers out of bounds. But this is definitely a pro offensive move, but I don't mind it. I mean, again, it's, where does the UFL fit? It is professional football, but it's clearly the goal is to get into the NFL. So it is almost a developmental league. So I don't hate it. I think I get it for the entertainment value. We have to understand that if the UFL is going to survive, it needs to get eyes on it, get butts in seats and things like that. So 1 foot inbounds there. Don't mind that one. I think it's going to be a bit exciting. I think the field goal one could be a bit gimmicky. The tush push, I don't like the principle of it, but let's be honest, probably not going to affect the game. This one definitely going to affect the game, and I think could make it a bit more exciting here. Next up, red zone penalties. So I actually like this one. They're basically saying hey, we're going to enforce half the distance to the goal. The red zone's going to look like what happens in the NFL. I think this is a really actually a great job of them to say, hey, we tried something and it did not work. What used to happen last season is, let's say, they would just essentially, whatever the penalty was, they would award that full yardage. So let's say you're on the 6-yard line and somebody jumps off sides. They are going to move that ball the full 5 yards to the 1-yard line instead of that half the distance to the goal. I thought that was a little bit ridiculous, a little bit gimmicky last season. So I'm happy they're changing this rule, and it is aligning with the NFL, which is the ultimate goal of the league, to get guys to the NFL. So I did think, them enforcing all of those yards, especially in the red zone, whether it was unsportsmanlike conduct, pass interference, or whatever that may be. I thought that being able to mirror the NFL and how they do it, I think is much more appropriate for what this league should be. And then this is another big one that is going to be very controversial for, I think, good reason. No more punting inside of the 50-yard line. A team cannot punt once they are past the 50-yard line. So the way this is going to look is, so there's a first caveat. This rule does not apply inside the last 2 minutes of the first or second half, right? So ending the game and ending the first half, this rule does not apply. But if your team lines up and the ball is spotted inside the opponent's territory, so 49 and plus, right, across the 50, you cannot punt. So if let's say the Birmingham Stallions make it to the Dallas Renegades 49-yard line, if they take a snap and take a 30-yard sack and it is fourth and forever, they have to go for it. There is, whether it's a penalty, you get a holding or anything like that, whether it's fourth and a million yards, you have to go for the fourth down. Now, we'll see how this actually plays out. It's kind of interesting. If you're a big college football fan, you probably have seen this play. This is several years ago now, where La Tech had a 3rd and goal from their own 8-yard line. So this would be 3rd and 90 something yards here. 93, 92 yards. So 3rd and 92. So essentially, if the UFL found themselves in the situation, a team in the UFL was all the way back on their goal line for some crazy reason, they would have to go for it on 4th down. Now, how often does that actually happen? We'll see. As far as our team's going to be, this is going to be a little bit interesting how this one plays out. Our team's going to try to gimmick this a little bit? Are they just going to just play normally and just kind of deal with it? I think this one is one that may be a one that's going to get a lot of headlines and really isn't going to impact the game a whole ton. It's really, obviously, the point of this rule is to encourage teams while they're in the opponent's field position to go for it, right? They want aggressive play style, aggressive coaching. That's kind of, again, the theme, right? Pro offense. They want to see some of these big plays. They want teams, they don't want it to be a punt fest, right? They are trying to make special teams matter, but they want field goals to matter. They want kickoffs to matter, but the UFL hates punting, I think is what we've seen over the years in kind of the rules that they're making. But hey, again, I like that it's not going to apply to the end of the first half and the end of game situations where things are critical, and it will look like normal football in that way. I'm curious to see how many times this actually comes up throughout the season to create an issue. But the intent of the rule is to make teams be aggressive once they cross the 50-yard line. Also, if you are on the 50-yard line, you can still punt. You have to actually cross the 50-yard line for this rule to take effect. All right, overtime. Overtime, this one, if you watched the UFL last year, is pretty much the same. It's an interesting format, though, if you are new to the UFL. Let me see if I can pull up one of the pictures here. I see where I put this. Let me go ahead and grab this here for us so we can see what I'm talking about. It's almost a little bit of a soccer shootout is what we see here. So let's pull this up here. All right. So with overtime in the UFL, basically what happens is you get 3 shots from the 5 yard line, and it's a best of 3 situation. So it's like almost similar to the 2 point conversion, the overtime rules past the second overtime in college, where teams just alternate 2 point tries from the 5. The thing with this is it's a best of 3 format, right? So as we can see down there, it's almost like combining college overtime plus soccer shootouts. And then if the teams were tied after the best of 3, you would just kind of go into a sudden death, first one to make it and then get a stop on the other side. It's it's an interesting rule. I personally love the college overtime rules, where it's just start each team gets it at the 25-yard line and keep going back and forth and let it play out on the field. This is a bit gimmicky, but it is what they did last year. It was not the worst rule. It's definitely interesting. So yeah, teams alternate from the 5. The home team has a choice to go offense or defense first. In playoffs, championship environment, they would use a coin toss in this one to decide it. But their overtime is going to be the same this year. Something that will be changing: points, extra points after touchdowns here. Typically, the UFL, spring football, one of the big things they were known for is that there was no extra points, right? Extra points weren't really a thing. However, this year, typically it's you either go from it for the 2 for 1 point, you go from it from the 5 for 2 points, and the 10 for 3 points. They are bringing back the extra point. So you can kick an extra point like the NFL from the 33-yard line for 1. You can go for 2 from the 2-yard line, or you can go for 3 from the 8-yard line. So this is a bit of a change here as far as how that extra point is going to look. It depends on the coach. We have some first-time coaches in the league here with AJ McCarron, Ted Ginn, and a couple other guys. They may want to go for 2 every time, right? Traditionally, a lot of the older coaches in the league, Bob Stoops and guys like that, they liked more of the traditional format. So they would always go for 1, even when it was just like, you had to go for it, couldn't kick the extra point. So I have a feeling we may see a decent amount of extra points. Obviously, game situation scenario may matter, but a lot of these coaches kind of fall into what they know. So this does kind of give a little bit of a bailout to some coaches. I kind of, I was coming around to the whole, hey, let's actually really decide this on the field. No extra points kicking, no gimme points, as you would say, right? So they're bringing it back to the NFL, but you still have the 2 and the 3-point option. So really what it looks like differently from the NFL is that 3-point option from the 8-yard line. Everything else is kind of mirrored up to the NFL here. Another thing that is reverting back to the NFL here is the standard coin toss before the game and overtime. So game will start with a coin toss, and then prior to overtime, where the visiting team will go ahead and be able to call. Previous seasons, it was just the home team would decide. So instead of it just being, hey, home team, whatever we're going to do whatever you want to do, now you actually got to do a coin toss. I think this is completely appropriate. I mean, that's kind of how football has been played. So there's some of these it's like either pro offense or let's actually revert back to what the NFL does because it makes sense. And I don't hate it. The UFL, again, experimental, developmental league, try new things. That's how you get your league noticed. That's how you get things like the kickoff into the NFL, right? I think that's fine. But yeah, I do appreciate them. If things don't make sense, let's go ahead and go back to what we know in the usual NFL rules. And then our final rule change, new kickoff rules, because everybody loves new kickoff rules. Look, I am not a major proponent of this new kickoff. I don't even know what sport it looks like. Maybe rugby type of deal. Maybe, I don't know, Australian football or whatever that may be. But essentially, it is still going to be this kind of funky format here. This is a great picture that someone set up. This is of last year's format. Now, the changes here for this year, the kicker is still going to kick off from the 30-yard line, so that stays the same. But the kickoff team, instead of lining up at the 40, they're going to be at the 45. and the receiving team, instead of lining up at 35, they are going to be at the 40. So we're moving everything up 5 yards or back or however, maybe forward towards the kicker, because I think what they're trying to do is give the returner more space for big returns, right? The landing zone is still the same from the goal line to the 20. They did change that if you kick it out of bounds or you kick it straight into the end zone, it goes straight to the 40-yard line instead of the 35 that was last year. Now, the kicker, we saw some of this in the NFL, where if a kicker is good enough and they can get it in the landing zone but bounce it into the end zone, that comes out to the 20. So there is some advantage if you have a kicker that can kind of do one of those, I don't know, spinner kicks or spiral kicks, to where essentially it'll touch down and then kind of have a high hop, almost like an onside kick, and get away from the returner there. So there is some benefit there, but really what they're trying to do with the new kickoff and kind of the entire point of what the NFL did, they want more returns. And by moving the teams up, they're giving the returners more space to create dynamic plays to let special teams matter. So again, I think the UFL, they want offense, right? They want aggressive, exciting games. They don't want, you punting back and forth. They want teams to go for it. They want to reward those things. They like special teams. Field goals matter. 4-point field goal, if you have a great kicker, that's going to be a separator. We've seen two of the better players to come out of spring football are kickers. Brandon Aubrey, Jake Bates, they were a big thing. Trust me, I was able to go to a game and sit in a press box in San Antonio, and the UFL, officials, one of the things was that game wasn't particularly exciting, but they were like, hey, at least the Michigan kicker, Jake Bates, was able to make some big kicks, right? So they are rewarding what has worked for them with the field goals. They like the kickoffs. They want special teams to matter. Seems like they just hate punters because they're taken away. You can't punt past the 50-yard line. Punting rules were already hard in this league. So if you're a punter, UFL probably not the league for you. But anyone else looking to get their shot, definitely some opportunity there. So a little bit of a recap. The big one, 4-point field goal, 60 and plus. I think that has some cool potential. Banning of the tush push. Again, I know it's going to be controversial. I personally don't love it, but there have been 0 tush pushes run in all of spring football. You just don't have the time to perfect it, and it just doesn't come up. 1 foot in bounds going to the college catch rules, red zone penalties, and the standard coin toss are going to revert back to the NFL. Red zone penalties, half the distance to the goal. Yes, we're going to do a coin toss before overtime and to start the game instead of the home team just deciding what they want to do. You cannot punt inside the opponent's territory except in the last 2 minutes of each half. So if you cross the 50-yard line, you have to go for it on 4th down. Overtime, kind of going to the NFL, you can do a 1-point kick. You can do a 2-point from the 2. You can do a 3-point from the 8-yard line. That is a little bit of the nuance there. That was the extra points after touchdown. Overtime, a little bit of that soccer shootout. 3 tries from the 2-yard line, the 3 tries from the 5-yard line. Best of 3 scenario, and then sudden death from there. And then finally, our grand spanking new kickoff rules. They just moved the kick return and the kickoff team 5 yards forward to give the returners more space. Still going to look like what it looks like in the NFL and what we saw last year. That is it for the new rules here. What is to come? Look, season starts March 27th. We are about 30 days out. As I told you, we're going to be doing the 8-team previews, a little bit of short episodes. Hey, let's just introduce these teams. Did an episode, everything you need to know about the UFL already. That talked about, who are the coaches, who are the new teams, all that stuff. So check that out if you haven't. We'll be doing the 8-team previews, do a little bit of a season preview before the show. This will, weekly. It'll be just a one-time weekly betting show that's sports betting channel. That's what we're going to be doing. So I'll do a season preview where I, give out some futures. There's only 8 teams, so probably give out 1 or 2. I will say it's interesting. Only one sportsbook has laid out their odds right now. It's the old ESPN Score Bet app. They have put out some week 1 lines and some futures. I'm sure DraftKings and FanDuel and all those other ones will follow. So we should get more as it gets closer. We'll do one there. And then again, during the week, as the season's going on, it'll just be a one-time weekly episode. I will break down each matchup, give out best bets. Hopefully we'll get some player props. We'll kind of see how it looks like. UFL, always a bit of a wild, wild west when it comes to betting, but super, super stoked for the season. I told you guys when they had rules. They finally put out rules a little late in the game, but at least we are over a month out. Huge impact on how this is going to play. So we want to keep in mind kickers are going to matter. Offense is going to matter. That doesn't mean we just automatically blindly smash a bunch of overs, especially week one. Got to be careful there. There's no preseason. So defense is usually ahead of offenses. But now we finally have a format of how this is going to look out and can move forward and kind of figure out how this is going to look. All right, folks, hope you are just as jacked as I am for the UFL 2026 season. You know what they say. A lock a day keeps the bookie away. And here at the DGen Docs, we've got your prescription. From Doc here on DFSG Plus, I am out of here.